Hey guys, welcome to Pour My Mods. Today is a good day for two reasons. For one, I'm super excited about this part that I developed for the Mark III Supra. I'm very proud of this, and this is the first video that I've filmed in my new shop space. So I developed a new rear big brake upgrade option for the Mark III Supra. So historically, the only two brake upgrades that I'm aware of are the Evo Brembos, which $600 for used calipers plus the cost of rotors. And then you might have to buy new brake lines too, I'm not sure about that. Or you could do a very expensive, but also a nice Willwood upgrade, but a lot of us don't have that money. This bracket that I developed here will allow you to do a rear big brake upgrade that is better than the Evo calipers, and the whole upgrade is gonna cost about as much as those Evo calipers. These adapter brackets are not out yet at the time of this video. These are the prototypes, but I will be doing a group buy on these to gauge interest on how many I should make. The price of these is still undetermined as of recording this video, but I'm gonna do a group buy to gauge the interest of these and to help me with the production costs of getting the first batch made. But the calipers that I got for this brake upgrade are for a Lexus LS430. I'll put all the official years and everything for the parts that I used on screen. But I got Lexus LS430 brake calipers, and you can get those off Rock Auto for like $50 to $90 each. It depends. There might be a core charge too, but I think I paid $90 for each caliper. And the brake rotors that we're using for this kit are Mark IV Supra twin turbo brake rotors, which are huge, way bigger than the Mark III rear rotor. They're about an inch bigger in diameter. It is such a massive upgrade. And I think they're like $30 or $40 each. And then you also are going to need different brake hoses and of course brake pads. And all of that added up, the cost of the rotors, the cost of the calipers, and even the cost of these brackets, even if I make these stupid expensive, this whole kit, this whole big brake upgrade is gonna run you $600, maybe even a little bit less. And that's about how much the Evo 8 rear Brembos are. So this is a massive win for the Mark III Supra community, in my opinion. This bracket is going to be the most expensive part of the whole upgrade. So I already did the big brake upgrade on this side of the car. Why don't we go over to the other side and I'll show you how to put it on. First thing we're going to do is just break loose this brake line from the caliper. Then remove the two 14mm bolts that secure the caliper to the car. Now you can remove the caliper from the brake hose. Next, we're going to remove the brake hose from the brake line. And yes, this is a ratcheting flare wrench. And yes, it's amazing. Let's get this brake rotor off. Now we can see if this caliper adapter bracket will fit. There are some casting inconsistencies with this knuckle here, and you might have to file or sand these down to make this fit inside. And it needs a little bit of filing. These casting marks stick up pretty big, so on the other side I used my small portable belt sander to file this down. You can also use a file, but that'll take a pretty long time, so I'm gonna use my little belt sander and take some material off here and here to make this bad boy fit. All right, that portable belt sander did the trick. It fits beautifully now. I freaking love those portable belt sanders. Now we can put the bolts in to secure the bracket to the knuckle. Now at the time of this video, these bolt holes are tapped in M10 by 1.5. Now this is a prototype version. I'm hoping to get that changed to M10 by 1.25 to make things a little bit easier so you can reuse your factory bolts. And also to get the bolts to properly thread in, I had to run a tap through them. I guess there was just a little bit of extra material in there from the machining process. Hopefully that will be addressed too when these go into production. But just keep that in mind that I did have to run a tap through these to get the bolts to actually start. Next we can install the rotor, and yeah, there's quite a bit of a size difference. Let's get this Mark IV rotor on here. Frickin' love it. Just to make things a little bit easier, I'm gonna install a lug nut on here to hold it in place. All right, now we can get this big red sexy caliper on here. We can put the bolts in. If you buy these calipers used, you might get lucky enough to get the bolts with it for free, like I did for the one side. But if you don't have the bolts, these are 3.5 inch long M14 by 1.5 bolts. And of course we got new brake pads. And don't forget the little cotter pin on here. Last piece of the puzzle is this brake hose. Now, this is not exactly vehicle specific, but basically the factory brake hose on the Mark III Supra is not a banjo bolt style fitting right here, but this brake caliper is designed for a banjo bolt, and the fitting on the factory Supra brake hose will not work. So you'll need to get a brake hose that has a banjo bolt style fitting on the end. This particular hose I got off of a 2002 Camry. I actually had this laying around, but it's a little bit too long. The factory length for the Supra brake line is 15 inches. This is a bit longer than that. You know, pretty much any Toyota, any Lexus brake hose will likely work because it's gonna accept the metric fitting here and be a banjo bolt. So just make sure it's at least 15 inches long with a banjo bolt on one end and a metric flare for the other. Let's get this brake hose connected. Another issue you might run into. A lot of people have encountered this brake fitting right here. See how the very end of it is a little bit flared out? That's from tightening it a bunch, and it's kind of mushroomed itself. And they don't like to fit into aftermarket hoses. So what I had to do on the other side, and I've heard other people do this as well for other brake hoses and such, I used my portable belt sander again and just gently filed down the end of that fitting to get rid of the mushroom bit. You could replace the fitting. I wouldn't advise that. I would just use a file or a belt sander just to get rid of that little mushroom, otherwise it might not fit. And if you've messed with these brake lines before, you may have already encountered this, so pro tip right there. Okay, you can see how the very end of that fitting is now a bit shiny. That's where I took my little belt sander to it, got rid of the mushroomed edge, and now it should fit no problem. Got the retaining clip in there, now we can tighten the fitting. All right. So like I said, I actually had these Camry hoses laying around, and it's a bit too long. It's pretty close to this control arm, so I would definitely recommend a slightly shorter hose. Bam! Now all you need to do is bleed your brakes, and your poor man mod big brake upgrade is now complete. How about that? Okay, got an update here. Changed the brake lines to these nice stainless steel lines. Here's the part number for the kit that I got. A Stop Tech, probably a generic Toyota line kit. It says it was for an LS400, but it just says Toy on the front, so it's probably Toyota Lexus, pretty general. But those fit absolutely perfect. And we also test fitted the stock 16-inch wheels. They do not fit. It will fit my 17-inch Lexus IS300 wheels and my 18-inch Cosmos wheels, but these will not fit the stock 16-inch saw blades. Now, after installing these brakes, I took it out for the first test drive, and before actually getting it out of the building, I noticed that the rotors were rubbing the caliper, and then when I took it on the road, noticed they were really rubbing. So what I did when I first found out that they were touching the calipers, simply pulled out my mini belt sander again and took a little bit of material off the caliper. And it's so close to this caliper to get 100% pad engagement, that little amount of slop might cause some interference with your caliper. Let me show you. So right here, my rotor was hitting. So you might need to pull out your belt sander again and file your edges down on the caliper here, just to make a little bit more clearance for the rotor. There we go. Super easy. The previous caliper I showed you was the driver's side, and this is the passenger side. So it actually wasn't rubbing up here. I took some material off preemptively, but it's touching pretty bad down at the bottom. So gotta take some material off the whole way in on that caliper. The driver's side just needed a little bit right here. The passenger side touches a little bit more, but it's nothing that that little belt sander can't handle. It's not deep, it's just the whole way in. Pretty simple. Ta-da! Freaking love that little belt sander. Super cheap, well worth the money. You definitely have to get one of these even if you don't do this brake kit. It is such a lifesaver. Made very quick work of that. Looking at it again, I noticed that the Mark IV rotor had just a tiny bit more of slop on the hub than the Mark III rotor, and I measured it, and the Mark IV rotor, the bore diameter on the rotor is 1.9 millimeters larger. And if you divide that in half, 0.9 millimeters-ish on each side of the rotor on the hub. So about 0.9 or about a millimeter of slop. And that's about how much the rotor was digging into the caliper. That is such a small number. Just by looking at the rotors, you would think they are the same size. The Mark III Supra hub, the outside diameter is 60.1 millimeters. The hub bore for the Mark IV rotor is 62 millimeters. So there's a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of slop. That could be what was causing, or at least not helping, the interference with the caliper. So what I did for this is more of a tool than a part, but basically like a hub-centric ring. I 3D printed a ring here with an inside diameter of 60.1 millimeters and an outside diameter of 62 millimeters. Now basically all this is doing is keeping the rotor perfectly centered on the hub until you get the wheel on and tighten it. So nothing is relying on this like to be mounted. This is just holding it center until you get the wheel on. Now you could make your own. Just needs to be about a millimeter thick or 0.9 millimeters thick on each side to make it perfectly centered. What I can do is, for mega cheap, also provide these if you want to buy these hub rings from me, or I can provide you the file and you can 3D print your own, or you can make your own. It's really simple and really cheap, but let me show you how tight this makes it. Absolutely no play whatsoever. That 3D printed spacer is the absolute perfect size. And then my wheel spacer does slide right over it. It doesn't interfere with anything. But what it does, it keeps the rotor perfectly center until you get the wheel on to tighten it. So more of a tool than a part, I would think. But yeah, I can provide these also if that is something you guys are also interested in. Very cheap and easy to make. All right, finally, the Poor Man Mods rear big brake kit for the Mark III Supra is complete. Not that difficult to install, but there were some growing pains that I had to figure out along the way once I got my prototype bracket made. Now that I've solved all those issues and I've taken the car out for a drive, the brakes feel absolutely amazing. I also have the Mercedes 4-piston calipers up front. The brake pedal and performance still feels absolutely phenomenal. I do not feel like I need to upgrade my brake master cylinder. And like I said in the beginning of this video, and at the time of recording this video, I will be doing a group buy for the brackets to make this kit work. That'll help me gauge interest on how many brackets to get made, and will also help me out with getting production started. And for the people that opt into the group buy, you will get a hefty discount on the brackets also. And just so I don't fill this video up with more information about the group buy, I'll have all the information that you need about that on my website, which will be linked in the description down below. So with that being said, obviously I am super excited about this. I know the Mark III Supra community has been wanting another big brake option for the rear for a very, very long time, something that's affordable and relatively easy to do. And now we finally have it. Just the way that this kit turned out absolutely blows my mind, especially with how little it's going to cost. You can do this whole kit for like 550 bucks on the cheap, maybe even cheaper if you get stuff used. It's ridiculous. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And if you're part of the group buy, or if you do buy these brackets in the future, I do really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Thanks.